We find ourselves right in the middle of a tragedy, a saga, a story that had a precursor that was prophetic. David had committed a terrible deed. He had slept with another man's wife, and he had had that man murdered in cold blood. He thought he had gotten away with it, but God came to the prophet Nathan with a word, revealed to Nathan what had been done, and sent Nathan to confront King David. In the course of the confrontation, David is called onto the carpet. His deeds have been revealed, the curtain pulled back. Before God, nothing is a secret. And in the course of this conversation, Nathan the prophet tells David what the consequences would be. In chapter 12, verse 10, I'll read it for you. Nathan tells David, "Now therefore, or as a result of the things that you've done, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me. You have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house." And we've seen this happen with David's first son, Amnon, and the deeds that he did, raping a sister, to now then the reaction of Absalom, Tamar's brother, killing Amnon, going on the run, now leading a coup, a revolt against his father. I will raise up adversity from your own house. And then Nathan, the Lord through Nathan, tells David, "And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it in secret, but I will do this thing before all of Israel, before the sun." Heavy words from the Lord, serious consequences. Now, in this tragedy, everyone has free will. Everyone is making decisions, and those decisions carry with them consequences that reverberate. David has made a series of decisions, poor decisions, and those decisions have led to consequences, even in his own just dealing with Absalom, his poor leadership, his advocating his moral authority and responsibilities. The decisions David has done has led to decisions that Absalom makes. David is making decisions, free will decisions. He's reacting, he's responding. Absalom's acting, responding. Every player in this story has the free will to make their own choices. Their choices affect others as the consequence of decisions go. But in the middle of it all, in the course of it all, none of this was beyond the predestination, the determination, the foreknowledge of God. God had told David because of his sin, the sword would not depart from his house. Adversaries from within his house would rise up against him. And then we're also told that his neighbor would take his wives, would desecrate his wives. And this wouldn't be done in secret as David's sin had been, but would be done in such a way that it was public. Now, I say that because where we've left off our story puts ourselves in the middle of one of the most brutal passages in all of the Bible. We find ourselves in 2 Samuel 16, picking up with verse 15. Absalom is making his way. David is on the run. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, they came to Jerusalem. So Absalom has come to the capital city, the city that David has vacated. And we're told Ahithophel was with him. Now, Ahithophel, just for a recap, Ahithophel was one of David's most trusted counselors. He was an older man. He was the grandfather of Bathsheba. So he watched David take his granddaughter, have an affair with her, have her husband murdered. Ahithophel, who's close to David, has watched all of this unfold, and he's bailed. He had left. He went back to his own town. Absalom, as he's making his way to take the throne, reaches out to Ahithophel, thinking, I need counsel. I need people that have done this before. I need to create an administration. I'm going to be king. So he reaches out to Ahithophel, who's all too willing to join Absalom in this revolt against David, because Ahithophel has an axe to grind. And we can understand. If we're being real honest and fair, our hearts kind of are weighed heavy by what Ahithophel has experienced. And so here he is. He's with Absalom. They've come to Jerusalem. Verse 16, and so it was, when Hushai the Archite, now we were introduced to him in our previous study. He's another counselor of David, an older fella, along with Ahithophel. Hushai is the only person that's referred to constantly as being the friend of David. Hushai is wanting to go with David into exile. David tells Hushai to go to Jerusalem and serve Absalom. Now, Hushai is going to act as a bit of a spy. He's going to try to figure things out. He's going to try to get word to David what Absalom's next steps are, how all of this is unfolding. So you have Absalom in Jerusalem. He's got two counselors, Ahithophel, who has an axe to grind, and Hushai, who, well, is a double agent. It's complicated. So Hushai the Archite, David's friend, he came to Absalom. Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. That's a good way to butter up a guy. So Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Like basically, you're my dad's best friend. What are you doing here? Why aren't you with daddy? Why did you not go with your friend? So Hushai said to Absalom, no. But whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence. And so Hushai is saying, my loyalty is not particularly just to David, it's to the nation, it's to the Lord. And if you're king, you're his son. I just want to serve, I want to be a part. Now, I think he's honest in that regard, but there is a double under the current motivation to Hushai. So Absalom said to Ahithophel, give advice as to what we should do. So they've come into the city. Absalom's on the throne. David is out in the wilderness. Power has shifted. Absalom is the king, as he would consider. And so now they want to decide what's next. And so Absalom is going to his trusted counselors, men that have done this before, have been around the block, his king's court. He goes to Ahithophel. What's next? What's the play here? Now, this is where it gets rough. So Ahithophel said to Absalom, you want to know what's next? Go in to your father's concubines. And we were told back in chapter 15, verse 16, that David had left 10 of these women to tend to the palace. Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house. And all Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong. What is being encouraged by Ahithophel is take your father's concubines and rape them. Again, I told you this is a man with an axe to grind. Now, Ahithophel's logic is that this will absolutely sever ties with David. Like the nation will see this and they will know there's no going back. You're either with Absalom or you're with David, but there's no chance of Absalom and David reconciling. The divide, the shift, it will be, that chasm will be solidified. There's no coming back from this. Verse 22, so they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house. And keep in mind, while God foresaw what was going to happen, Absalom is making his own decisions. So they pitched a tent for Absalom. So this is very public. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. And so he rapes these women publicly in the presence of Israel. Everyone who's watching this finds it to be abhorrent, but realizes that this transition of power is now permanent. We're told the top of the house. What house? Again, I think Ahithophel, being the vengeful man that he was, gripped by bitterness, probably pitched that tent in the very place that David stood looking down onto his granddaughter. Started the whole thing. We're told of Ahithophel, verse 23, and this is kind of an added commentary by our author, that the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all of the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. And so we're given this a bit of commentary that Ahithophel was a trusted man. He was a brilliant tactician. He was a wise counselor, even though what he's asking of Absalom here, instructing of Absalom, is absolutely deplorable. Moving onward. Moreover, verse 1 of chapter 17, Ahithophel said to Absalom, so what do? Well, we need to sever ties. This is how we're going to do it. The new plan, next strategy, Ahithophel giving counsel. Now let me choose 12,000 men. I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weak, weary, and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return, except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace. And this saying pleased Absalom and the elders of Israel. So Ahithophel is counseling Absalom to strike while the iron's hot. David's on the run. He is weary. He's tired. Get him before he can regroup, before he can hunker down in very familiar terrain. Let's get him. Give me 12,000 men. Absalom, you don't even need to do anything. You give me the soldiers. You give me the command. You give me the edict. We will go. We will hunt him down as a dog, and we will just kill David. We'll preserve the people. Once David's gone, you'll be king. There will be peace. Everyone will rally around you, and we can turn the page from the David saga. So this is Ahithophel's counsel, and there's wisdom to this. This is smart. David is on his heels. He is on the run. This would be the time to go after him. It is rough to concede that things have devolved to such a place that Ahithophel's counsel that he would go and murder David, that pleased Absalom. I mean, there can be conflict between fathers and sons, but clearly something has now happened within the heart of Absalom. Like he has passed the Rubicon. He has gone to a very dark place. Up until this point, while we might have been able to sympathize and relate to some of Absalom's experiences, I mean, how would you react if your sister had been raped and your father didn't do anything and you had been patient? How would you have reacted when you fled away and you were invited back only to be given the cold shoulder? We've walked our way kind of with Absalom, trying to be kind, leaning into the text, saying, I get it, I can relate, I can understand, but you go in and you rape your father's wives, okay, you lost me there, Absalom. And now to the point that you don't want to send your father into exile, or you don't want to, put him into a comfy retirement, but you're wanting to send 12,000 commandos to see your father murdered, and that doesn't grieve you at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It pleases you. Again, Absalom has made decisions as reactions to decisions made outside of his purview and control, but the man is making his own choices, and at this point, he has entered into a place of wickedness and evil. We can no longer sympathize. We can no longer relate. Absalom is in a bad place. Verse 5, so Absalom said, call Hushai the Archite also. Let us hear what he has to say too. So he's gotten counsel from Ahithophel, 12,000 soldiers, let's go tonight. But there is wisdom in a myriad of counselors, and so Absalom is doing a good thing here. Let's get Hushai's opinion on what the new plan should be. So Hushai comes into Absalom, and Absalom says, Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. Shall we do what he says? If not, speak up. So Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. Now note what Hushai is saying. He's saying, Ahithophel's giving sound counsel. Like, this makes sense. This seems logical. This is a good call. The only problem I would bring up is timing. It's good counsel. It's just not the right time to do such a thing. Now, keep in mind that Hushai is a secret agent too. Like, he's playing both sides of this. For, he continues, verse 8, you know that your father and his men, they're mighty men. And they are enraged in their minds. Like, they're mighty men and they're ticked off. Like a bear robbed of her cubs in the woods. Your father is a man of war and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place. And it will be when some of them are overthrown at first that whoever hears of it will say there is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. So Hushai's counsel is, okay, your father knows what he's doing. Which, keep in mind, David had spent years running from a king. David was familiar running from kings. Not just is he familiar with that, but the entire surrounding region is home turf. Absalom has grown up in kind of the posh understanding, the posh environment of the palace. David was a man of war. David was a man of the fields. David was a man of caves. David was a man who knew how to run, and he knew how to fight, and he knew how to engage in a de facto guerrilla warfare. Not just that, but he's got a whole group of men that are ticked off. They're not in Jerusalem, and they're back out in the wilderness. So Hushai's like, hey, before you take 12,000 men and go running after David, you might want to just pause and take a breath and come up with a plan, because you're likely to run right into his trap. There'll be a slaughter, at least initially. That word will get back to the rest of the camp of Israel, and their hearts will melt. They'll be afraid. You're going after a bear who has lost its cubs, and you need to tread lightly. This is Hushai's counsel, and there's wisdom there. Therefore, verse 11, I advise that all Israel be fully gathered to you. So here's my advice. Gather all of Israel from Dan, which is in the far north, to Beersheba, which is in the far south, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. So we will come upon him in some place where he may be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all of the men who are with him, there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he is withdrawn into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will pull it into the river until there is not one small stone found there. So Hushai's counsel is, don't take 12,000 and go immediately. Take a breath, send word, gather all of Israel. Gather a massive army, and then when you attack David, you'll have an overwhelming force, and then kill David and his men. So that's Hushai's advice. So Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. So Absalom, as he's weighing the dynamic, the pros, the cons, he's got his lists. He decides, I think that there's better counsel with the strategy that Hushai has put forth, then the counsel of Ahithophel. And then we're told, and again, this is added commentary by our author, for the Lord had proposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. What we're being told is that Absalom is choosing the wrong advice. Like, what would have done David in? Well, it appears that Ahithophel had the right strategy. Hushai had a good strategy, but God intervenes here. He puts his thumb on the scale. Absalom chooses Hushai, and we're told why. Because the Lord intends to use this decision to now judge Absalom for his own sin. You can say, well, wait, how does that happen? That's the same thing that God had done with David. That God had orchestrated events, allowed events to happen in order to judge David for his sin. And now the same thing is happening. The moral of the story, friends, that sin has consequences. That God allows sin to have consequences. Why? Well, first, he's just, but also the consequences. They articulate to the individual that you're not above the law. It communicates to everyone else. No one's above the law. Decisions carry with them effects. Your decisions have effects. Do you know that? They'll have effects personally. They'll have effects generationally. Do you know that your decisions, parents, your decisions, the choices you make, will have a reverberating effect that you cannot stop with your kids and your grandkids? I'm saying that even to myself, to raise the bar and the decisions we make. Because decisions have consequences. And what Absalom has done has brought God's ire. It has brought his disdain. And God has decided to bring disaster and judgment on Absalom. So a plan's in place. Word's going to be sent as far north as Dan, to the southern regions of Beersheba. Absalom's intent is to develop a big army, an overwhelming force. This will take time. It'll require orchestration. So he chooses what Hushai had put forth. So Hushai, verse 15, he goes to Zadok, Abiathar the priest. Now this had all been hatched earlier in a conversation between David and Hushai. So Hushai comes to these men. He says, thus and so Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus I also advise. So he brings them into the story. Now therefore send quickly, and I'm glad we just didn't get a repeating of it all. Now therefore send quickly, tell David, let David know what's going on, saying, do not spend this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up. So Jonathan and Ahimaaz, they stayed at En-Rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. A female servant would come and tell them, and they would go to tell David. So these are the sons of the priests that are going to be carriers of this message from Ahithophel to David, what's going on. Nevertheless, we're told, a lad saw them and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly. They came to a man's house in Barim, who had a well in his court. They went down into the well. So this is about 2 miles northeast of Jerusalem. So Hushai gets the message to Zadok and Abiathar. Zadok and Abiathar give the message to their sons. Their sons have been now commissioned, take this, carry it, find David, let him know what's going on. So they flee Jerusalem. They get to Barim, 2 miles northeast. They've been discovered. Word's getting back to Absalom. So they're now being hunted. They're going out there looking. But there's this well in a courtyard. They go down, they're hiding in the well. So you got the scene. Then a woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread around grain on it and the thing was not known. So she disguises that it's a well. It looks more like a millstone. So when Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, "Where is Ahimaaz and Jonathan?" The woman said to them, "Well, they've gone over the water brook." And when they had searched, they could not find them. They returned to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass, after they had departed, that they came out of the well. They went, they told David, they said to David, "Arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus has Ahithophel advised against you." So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had not gone over the Jordan. So David makes his escape. He gets word. He knows what the strategy is. He flees Israel. Again, he's going into very familiar territory, turf. He knows what he's doing. Now, the scene shifts very quickly, verse 23. So Ahithophel has been with Absalom. He's given advice. He's given counsel. Absalom has taken some of the advice to heart, and he's rejected another part. So we're not going to go after David. You're not going to allow me to take 12,000 men. Ahithophel at this point realizes that this house of cards is going to come down in a hurry. And so we read that when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. So he leaves Jerusalem. Then he put his household in order, and he hanged himself and died and was buried in his father's tomb. Ahithophel knows that Absalom's revolt will be short-lived. He knows that if they didn't get David then, they're never going to get David. That David will come back, and David is a man that keeps a record. Ahithophel knows that of that record, his part, especially the counsel of Absalom desecrating these women, would be known. And so instead of facing the trial and ultimately an execution, he saddles his donkey, and I can see the scene. We're going to go with Hushai's advice. And Ahithophel's like, he turns and he walks out. He exits stage left. He gets on his donkey, rides slowly home, gets his affairs in order, goes into his closet, takes his life. It's all up. He knows what's going to happen. His fate's been determined. Before we move from Ahithophel, there is an underlying lesson that should be mentioned, and it is the destructive nature of bitterness. Ahithophel had been wronged. Ahithophel had given his life to David, likely going all the way back to David on the run, that Ahithophel had seen in that young man promise, had witnessed that anointing, had seen God's hand on his life. Ahithophel had made a decision at some point in his life that he rejected the king, King Saul, and all the luxury and the comfort that came with following Saul, and he went into the wilderness to be with David. And he followed David, and he fought with David, and he took life for David. He counseled David through the highs and through the lows, through the trials and the tribulations. Ahithophel had been there, had been loyal, had been dedicated. It had not been Ahithophel's fault David had refused to go into war. And yet Ahithophel saw David destroy his family. And yes, he does the right thing by leaving. I can't serve this man anymore. I can't look him in the eye. I don't want to be part of his court. This is wicked. This is sinful. This is wrong. This is deplorable. Somebody should stand up to him, but that's not going to be me. And he goes back, and for 12 years, he thinks he's moved on. But has he? No. For those 12 years, that hatred, that hurt, that anger, it didn't go away. It festered, and it deepened, and it entered his bloodstream and his marrow. To the point that when the first opportunity arose where he could go after David, he didn't hesitate. And when he could stick it to David, he didn't hesitate. And when he had the chance to go and to kill David, he was ready. But it didn't play out like he had hoped. And ultimately, this man's bitterness only led to whose destruction? His own. The irony is, did it ever lead to the destruction of his enemy? No, David comes back to power. David comes back to the throne. Ahithophel thinks he got him, and then he realizes he escaped, and David was going to get away with it again. He was going to get away with it. Ahithophel's bitterness did not take down his enemy. It didn't have any effect on the person that had committed the wrong against him. But who did it destroy? Ahithophel. Not just to the point that he hangs himself. But let's back up. It had destroyed him to the point that he advised, counseled, and sanctioned the exact deed that had destroyed his family. A king taking advantage of a young woman. It had eroded his own moral standing, his own moral compass. Friend, you may have been absolutely wronged by someone else. And the truth, like Ahithophel, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything to deserve it. You are completely a victim of circumstance, like Ahithophel. And you're angry and you're hurt, and it's all justified. You have every right to be ticked off. But if you don't deal with it, it'll destroy you. Okay, Zach, great. Well, how do I deal with it? How do I deal with this hurt? How do I deal with these things that I'm justified in feeling? How do you deal with it? You can't. But Jesus can. You see, Jesus would say, "Cast your cares on me, for I care for you." And it's forgiveness that is the mechanism by which we can take those hurts and take those pains and take those, again, I'll use the word again because it's at justified feelings. We take them to Jesus and we pour out our heart, but we have to come to a point of forgiveness. Forgiveness does nothing to the person that committed the crime. It doesn't let them off the hook. God will judge, God will deal, God sees. Vengeance is mine, it says the Lord. That's not for us. But you have one of two options in the midst of your hurt. You can allow it to fester and then destroy you, or you can take it to Jesus and you can say, "Jesus, you've got to heal me of this. You've got to liberate me from this. And I have to make a decision that I have to forgive the person, even if they haven't asked for it, even if they don't deserve it, because I don't want this to kill me, because it will." And there's example after example after example after example in Scripture showing us this. Ahithophel, he carried it. He was burdened by it. And in the end, he died from it. And if there's not a better warning. So David, we get back to our scene. He went to Mahanaim. This is east of the Jordan. This is in the territory dominated by the tribe of Gad. Mahanaim is first mentioned in Genesis 32:2. It's called the camp of God. David goes to the camp of God. And Absalom crossed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. Amasa was one of Joab's cousins, another one of David's nephews. This man Asa was the son of a man whose name was Jeretha, an Israelite who had gone into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. And so again, Joab's cousin, another one of David's nephews, but Absalom makes this man captain and not Joab. And we can understand that Joab is a suspect character. As the kids would say, he's a little sus. So probably a good way to avoid Joab. We'll see that play itself out. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. And it happened when David had come to Mahanaim that Shobi, the son of Nahash from Rabbah, the people of Ammon, Shobi, interesting, is an Ammonite. And remember, David had murdered a bunch of Ammonites. And then Machir, son of Amiel from Lodabar, which we've been introduced to Machir before. This was the man who had a house in Lodabar that Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the grandson of King Saul, had gone and fled and was hiding in, that David had sent men because he wanted to show kindness. So this man had seen David's kindness. He had seen David's grace. So you have an Ammonite who had seen David's justice. You have this man who had seen David's grace, cast of characters, and a third man, Barzillai from Gilead, the Gileadite from Rahalim. These three men, so David's at the camp of God. He's in this town. He's on the other side of the Jordan. These three men, knowing David's there, they pull resources, and we're told, verse 28, that they brought beds and basins, earthen vessels and wheat, barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curds, sheep and cheeses of the herd for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Amazing. This is actually a very, in the Hebrew language, it's a very particular way that it's phrased. If you look back at these verses, just kind of note, even highlight or circle, and, the word and. Beds and basins, vessels and wheat, barley and flour, grain and beans, lentils and seeds, honey and curd, sheep and. This is unique in the Hebrew language because it's very particular in making sure that the details are being articulated. Meaning that God isn't just interested in sending provisions to David, but God took very specific note on what provisions David and his people would need. You know, David is experiencing the consequences of his sin. He's experiencing the consequences of very terrible decisions that he's made. David finds himself exiled, back in the wilderness, on the run. He has no one to blame but himself. And not just that, but God had warned him in advance. Hey, if you see these things happening, don't blame anyone but yourself, David. Right? He's looking at Absalom. He can be all ticked off at Absalom or this and that and the other, and yet he goes back to what Nathan had said, what the Lord had said. Hey, the sword will depart, adversary will rise up within your family, and some deplorable things are going to happen. And why will these things take place, David? Because of you. So you have no one to blame but yourself. For these are consequences I am allowing because of the decisions that you've made. Now, we get that. But this is what blows me away, and we'll close with this thought. David is in the midst of experiencing the consequences of his sin. It's rough. It's tough. And yet, even in the midst of this season where he's dealing with consequence for sin, and God's grace, he was still there to provide. Not necessarily what David would want, but God knew exactly what David needed, even down to the specific details. David will need this and that. He'll need this and that. He'll need this and that. He's dealing with his sin, and that's good. But I'm not done, and that's good. And if you find yourself in a season where you're experiencing the consequences of your own sin, and you're like, I have no one to blame but myself, let me say that. Don't blame anyone but yourself. Well, it was the woman you gave me. No. Own it. Accept it. Recognize it. And then lean into it. I have no one but to blame. This is my fault. And then say, but Lord, please take care of me. This is not for my destruction. This is for my betterment. This is for my instruction, my development. This is how you're going to weed those things out of me. This is how you're going to make me a better person. This is how I'm going to learn not to do that again. Don't we do that with our kids? Like, the problem with not giving your kids immediate consequence to action is that they don't associate the right consequence with the action. Like the reason that your kid does something and they need a quick popping is why? That's you programming them that if I do that, there's a consequence. If a kid does something and there's no consequence and you're like, that's just bad, well, okay, that might be bad, but that, I really like sin and that's kind of fun and I'm going to do that again. Like that's why there's a consequence. As a parent, we give a consequence. Not to destroy our kid, but to try to teach our kid that when we do things, there are consequences. David is experiencing consequence. But that doesn't mean God is absent or God has abandoned. No, these few verses indicate that God is very aware, God is very involved, and God is providing what is needed. And in your life, if you're in that season, own it, come before the Lord, and ask that He would take care of you. For He will. For this is but just a season. This isn't your full story. So, Father, Lord, we just leave that there.